All the characters in this story are over 18 years old. I am 42 years old. I have a wonderful, supportive partner and two daughters. My friends call me Anya. As a therapist, I've built a strong bond with my girls. Today, Lily and I had a heart-to-heart. Mom, was Dad your first? Of course, sweetheart. Were you asking about before or after the ceremony? Why this sudden interest? You've always told me a girl should only be with one man and all that. And Michael has been dropping hints, so I figured we'll end up together anyway. What's the difference, now or later? Do you truly feel ready? I do. I can't resist. It's normal, isn't it? It's normal to have these feelings, but you've only been seeing him for 6 months. You're both so young. How can you be sure about the future? Might you not regret acting on impulse later? But what am I supposed to do, Mom? Tears welled in my grown daughter's eyes, and I embraced her, offering comfort as always. We can go shopping tomorrow and find you something to help you manage these urges. My daughter looked at me, surprised, then hugged me tightly. You're the best, Mom, she whispered. That evening, gazing at the cityscape, I recalled my own first time. It began at 18. My body was a source of constant new sensations. Hormones surged. I felt lost and alone with these new feelings. My strict parents only exacerbated the situation. There was no one to confide in, no one to offer guidance. At the time, my cousin Daniel lived with us. 5 years my senior, but we'd always been close, playing together as children. I started exhibiting affectionate behavior, playfully hugging him from behind or leaning on him while watching films. He seemed unfazed. We often stayed up late watching football, or rather, he watched, and I kept him company, sometimes deliberately sitting close. My father retired early, and I'd playfully inch nearer to Daniel, asking about the game. One night, we sat together, the television muted, the lights off. I don't know what came over me. It was purely subconscious. Help me grab something from the kitchen. Come on. I took his hand and led him. My first kiss. An intense warmth flooded my being. I perspired, my head spun, my legs turned to jelly. A sudden noise startled us, and we sprang apart, returning to our seats. My heart pounded. I struggled to breathe. We both stared at the screen. Well, I'm off to bed. Sleep evaded me for hours, consumed by feverish thoughts and the throbbing in my ears. That night marked a turning point. I would describe our relationship as unspoken affection. We never discussed our feelings or made promises. We acted as always, but something had shifted between us. I wondered if every girl possessed such a sensitive spot on their neck. I imagine everyone knows that incredible, almost ethereal feeling. Each day I floated to university and eagerly anticipated returning home. Again, words were unnecessary. The stolen moments spoke volumes. I fantasized about us as a couple, my cheeks burning with a blush. And when he released me, his warmth lingered. Sadly, or perhaps thankfully, we were rarely alone. My mother worked only half days. Before that night, I'd wrestled with my feelings. But now, the internal struggle intensified, becoming almost unbearable. I was a young woman experiencing powerful emotions and dreams. Despite knowing right from wrong, I couldn't control myself. I yearned to relive that feeling. While showering, I sometimes imagined Daniel walking in. He, however, remained cautious, never pushing things further. 2 weeks later, my parents celebrated their anniversary at a restaurant. For the first time, Daniel and I were truly alone. He was in his room, presumably studying. I paced for half an hour, torn between desire and guilt. Eventually, my feelings propelled me to his door. I knew he saw me, yet he continued writing. I wondered if his heart raced as mine did. I should leave, but my legs carried me forward. He made a strange sound and suddenly lifted me into his arms. This is it, this moment. We can love. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears. What have I done? This is wrong. His scent, previously intoxicating, now repelled her. I have to go, she thought, but fear paralyzed her. Her body still yearned for him. Another voice whispered, Relax, it's okay. Nothing's happened. You wanted this. It feels good. You need this. It's natural. You're a woman and he's a man. She tried to silence these thoughts, feigning sleep. After that, she avoided late-night television. Though difficult, her upcoming exams helped, and Daniel's final exams began, occupying his time. A month passed. He graduated and left for his own city. No goodbyes, no explanations, just a hug before he boarded the car. I missed him. I longed for a message, some form of contact. That year, my parents gifted me a laptop, opening up the world of the internet. I turned 21. People told me I was attractive. I often scrutinized my reflection. Long, wavy dark hair, a slender frame, a small waist. Sometimes I saw beauty, other times flaws. Large brown eyes framed by thick lashes, but I fixated on what I perceived as a large nose and an imperfect face shape. My head buzzed with relationship advice, yet I kept men at arm's length, partly waiting for the one, partly due to my upbringing, prioritizing my studies. My parents held traditional values. Dating was out of the question. For us, relationships progressed directly from engagement to marriage. Thankfully, my parents respected my decisions, and I declined all proposals. Daniel found a partner. We traveled to their wedding in another city. Amidst the hustle and bustle, we barely spoke. Being near him made my heart race. I ached to confide in him. 5 days before the wedding, everyone decided on a day trip, leaving me behind to study for my exam in 10 days. Daniel's bachelor party was also scheduled for that day, meaning I would be completely alone. They left, and I settled down with a book. 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang. "Daniel, did you forget something?" "No, a friend's wife is in the hospital, so we postponed everything." My hands trembled. I retreated to my room to read, but concentration eluded me. "May I come in?" Daniel sat beside me. "Why didn't you go with the others?" "I have an exam soon." "I see." Silence hung heavy. What possessed me then? Perhaps I simply craved connection, to discuss my anxieties with someone I trusted. "How many times have you been intimate with her?" I curled up, tucking my knees, and lowered my head. He looked at me, surprised. "A couple of times. Do you like her?" "She seems nice. She'll make a good wife. Well-mannered, from a respectable family." "Do you love her?" He paused, considering. "I tried to find someone. I dated, but nothing clicked. My parents were eager for me to settle down. They kept suggesting potential brides. I liked her well enough, so I agreed. I'm tired of being single. I'm a man after all, and my mother needs help around the house. I want you to be happy, to find a good husband." He looked at me, and I smiled. His expression was unusual. "You've grown up so much. The last time I saw you—" His voice wavered, and he looked away. I needed to talk. "You know me. I can't talk to anyone else about this. How many times have you made love?" I must have lost my mind, but I genuinely wanted to help him. I was grateful for his past restraint. Understanding more about intimacy now, I realized how honorably he'd treated me. He hadn't taken advantage of me, hadn't broken my young heart, despite the immense effort it must have cost him. He'd protected me from potentially damaging consequences. Who knows what a less honorable man might have done? He stared, dumbfounded. Was I imagining things? His expression seemed to ask. "We're adults, and we're close. I'm studying psychology. I need practice. And we can help each other." After a moment, he spoke. 4 or 5 times. I stopped when a friend got an infection. And then it began. I transformed into pure emotion, devoid of reason. "I'll show you something. You need to win her over, body, soul, and heart, and then she'll be a wonderful wife, and you'll be happy." I pulled him into their soon-to-be shared bedroom, sitting on the plastic-covered mattress. "Pretend I'm her." "We'll create a plan," I said, outlining my vision of a perfect wedding night, a complete guide to intimacy and emotional connection. Should I try it? My voice sounded casual, but I trembled inside. We made love. I cried softly, tears of joy, not sadness. Even if I regretted it later, in that moment, I was happy. Without another word, we drifted into a blissful sleep. The doorbell woke me. I started to run, but his strong arms held me back. "It's the phone." "Relax. It's only been 3 hours. I'm going to marry you." "No, what are you saying? I need to marry you now." "No. What happened, happened, but we can't marry. We're cousins." "So? People marry their cousins. What about the children? Do you want them to suffer because we couldn't control ourselves? Imagine the gossip if you suddenly cancel the wedding and marry me. It's impossible. How could I live with myself knowing what I've done? It's my fault. I initiated everything." "No, it's my fault too." I'm transferring to another country. We'll forget this ever happened. I fled to the bathroom. He tried to reason with me, but I remained firm. The night of his wedding, I wept, imagining the scene in their marital bed. My heart shattered. That same year, defying my father's pleas and threats, I transferred universities. Life resumed its course, but I still kept men at a distance. A wound in my heart, perhaps, or something else. A year later, I moved from the dormitory to a rented apartment. One evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it and froze, astonished. Daniel stood there. "Hi, come in." An awkward pause, small talk, another pause. "I love you, and I can't live without you. I've made up my mind. You can't dissuade me. I was a fool to let you go, but I won't make that mistake again." What could my poor heart do? Love defies logic. I'd missed him terribly. My internal struggle finally ceased. I surrendered. I learned that morning that he'd divorced 6 months prior. He'd spoken to our parents, and they'd given their blessing. He'd been working hard, saving enough to buy a small apartment in the city. We married, adopted our daughters, and now life is perfect. What are you thinking about, love? Just our wedding night. Let's go to the bedroom. Remind me how it went. I've forgotten. I love you, and I can't live without you. I've made up my mind. You can't dissuade me. I was a fool to let you go, but I won't make that mistake again. What could my poor heart do? Love defies logic. I'd missed him terribly. My internal struggle finally ceased. I surrendered. I learned that morning that he'd divorced 6 months prior. He'd spoken to our parents, and they'd given their blessing. He'd been working hard, saving enough to buy a small apartment in the city. We married, adopted our daughters, and now life is perfect. What are you thinking about, love? Just our wedding night. Let's go to the bedroom. Remind me how it went. I've forgotten.